Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is Nashville Democratic Congressman Jim Cooper. Congressman, you voted for the recent budget deal, which puts all this budget impasse that we've had going on both the debt and the budget off until after the 2016 election. But it spends about $80 billion in new money split between military and domestic policy. You're supposed to be a fiscal hawk. Why would you vote for that?
Well, overall, Congress has been pretty good, believe it or not, in the last few years in controlling spending. We're actually below what Paul Ryan recommended in his 2011 budget.
But it's because of sequestration, and you don't like sequestration.
Well, sequestration is a clumsy way to do it. We should pick and choose priorities. We shouldn't have a lawnmower cut off all the grass and the weeds at the same height.
And this gets rid of it for 2 years. Why didn't this get rid of it completely?
Well, it should have, but we only had the votes to get rid of it for 2 years. And it doesn't, we are largely sticking with the reduced spending levels. We're just trying to balance things up a little bit. Defense was a particular need. It was shortchanged terribly. We're already cutting 90 to 120,000 U.S. Army troops, and it's a time when the world has never been more unstable. So it's really not a good time to be cutting back on our military.
Now, your colleague in the Senate, Bob Corker from here in Tennessee, voted against the budget deal. He says it's irresponsible because it breaks the existing Budget Control Act, because it uses budget gimmicks, and I'm quoting from here, budget gimmicks and one-time revenue grabs. Now, that sounds like something I'd hear from you.
Well, Bob Corker is exactly right on that portion of the deal. Now, it's 144 pages, and he's criticizing about 8 pages of it. They used a lot of slimy ways to get revenue, like we're selling some of our strategic petroleum reserve now that gas prices are at low. You should sell things at a high price, not a low price. There are other things, spectrum auctions and some timing differences, pension smoothing, gimmicks that really shouldn't have been in there.
Now, in addition to the $80 billion in new domestic and military spending, there's also an additional $32 billion being put into the Emergency War Fund. What is that, and how long has that been around?
Well, ever since we got involved in the Iraq and Afghan wars, this thing called the Overseas Contingency Operations.
And this is
off-budget
stuff.
Off-budget. It was designed for the genuine emergencies that our troops faced overseas, because those are unpredictable. What happened this time was the Republican majorities put a lot of base spending, operations and maintenance, regular routine things that are not overseas. They put that in the OCO fund just because it was off budget and they didn't want to pay for it. Now, fortunately, that problem has been solved with this. It will be at least partially paid for, which is much better than what Congress was thinking of originally.
Now, you keep offering legislation that would cut off the pay of congressmen if they don't pass the budget on time. Given all these other new budget gimmicks they've come with to kick the can down the road, are you going to expand the reasons to cut their pay, although it doesn't seem to have much impact?
Well, we were able to pass that bill and was in effect 1 year, and that was a year, believe it or not, even the Senate passed a budget. They hadn't done so for 5 years. But I have great difficulty getting my colleagues to vote to cut their own pay. This is not popular, as you can imagine, with them, but the 1 year it was in place, it worked, and worked very well.
Now, is this budget deal a victory for the president and Democrats, or is it a victory for Republicans because it takes an issue that divides them and puts it off until after the election so they don't have to deal with it in 2016?
Well, I think it was really a victory for the American people and for American business, because we need certainty and stability. There are many uncertainties in our lives, and our government shouldn't be a risk factor in and of itself. So while this period of respite is going on, we should be solving some of the basic problems. I mentioned tax reform earlier. There are many other problems that we need to get together with as legislators and solve, so that when the next period comes, they'll be solved, they won't recur.
Well, another area that keeps getting kicked down the road is driving our cars in terms of the transportation or roads deal in Congress. Now, they haven't been able to pass one. They've been going on continuing resolutions. A lot of programs are being and projects are being put off in Tennessee. Nobody's quite sure what we should do down here. There's a new, I think, 6-year bill that's come out of one of the House committees. Has it got a chance? What does it do? Is it worth even worrying about at this point?
Good for you, Pat. You're up to speed as always. There's actually a possibility of good news on this, because before we'd be having 3-month bills, maybe a 1-year bill. Now, with the prospect of a 6-year bill, that could be a real transportation bill. Now, it's not perfect. It's not fully funded. But to even have a 6-year term, that's something that Congress hasn't been able to do for the last 8 years. So this could be an important breakthrough, and it could be coming as soon as next week. So there's hope on this front. The missing piece is to have it be fully funded. And even Tennesseans are realizing now, with low gas prices, it might be the time to have a user fee, so that if you use our highways, you pay for their maintenance. That's a very sensible and conservative approach, but still that's not an approach that we've been able to get a majority of votes for in Washington.
You're on the Armed Services Committee, so let me ask you couple of foreign policy questions. The administration has pretty well admitted, along with the Pentagon, that their train and equip program to try to train some rebels in Syria just hasn't worked. Are we basically forfeiting that part of the world to the Russians because they've moved in there with planes and even with troops, it appears?
Well, I had voted against the train and equip mission because it didn't look like, as the president put it, that arming dentists and pharmacists in Syria was going to have an impact against ISIS or the other warring armies that are there. But don't give Putin too much credit. His entry into Syria is two things. One, it's hiding his retreat in the Ukraine, which is a significant blow to his prestige. And two, he's probably just entering a quagmire there in Syria because nobody in their right mind really wants to be involved in Syria. He's trying to prop up a puppet dictatorship in the Assad regime. Assad is failing. If he survives at all, it will be with a tiny portion of his former country. And really, the Russians are using this as a way to push out some extremists from their own country and to test some of their new weapons systems, which actually aren't that great. They launched some cruise missiles over Iran, and 4 of them crashed into Iran. So this isn't the best way to showcase Russian military strength.
Now, you've raised some questions as well about our policy where we do a lot of, provide a lot of money to several countries, almost providing them with their defense budget. You call that almost creating a host country stimulus program. Now, I thought you voted for the stimulus program, but this is not a good idea for our foreign policy?
Well, I believe in helping our own economy, but helping some of these foreign warring nations, I think a lot of that money is down a rat hole. We need a much more sensible foreign policy. For years, we've flailed around the world and not really succeeded in achieving our goals. Now that we've spent, over a decade in both Iraq and Afghanistan, you have to ask yourself, what do we have to show for that effort? Now, our fighting men and women are the best in the world, best in the history of the world. Nobody has made a greater sacrifice than they have in their families. But when it comes to achieving a stable government over there or a more prosperous economy, so many of those tribal cultures just seem to want to fight each other forever. And so many of their disputes have been going on for over 1,000 years. It's not like U.S. foreign policy is going to be able to solve that in a hurry.
And that's the difference between this part of the world and what we have done for many years in Europe in terms of keeping troops and money over there, and in terms of Korea, where we have propped up the South Korean government for well over 50 years.
Well, we've had troops in NATO countries and in the Far East, but the European countries got rid of their tribal period about 500 years ago. Some other parts of the world are still undergoing their tribal period.
Well, they're not having a world war over there, yeah. Let's take a break. We're talking with Congressman Jim Cooper. There are a lot of issues going on in Washington. We've been talking about the budget deal and other things. Back to continue our conversation with the Congressman after this break.